Optimizing yourself and your team for better judgment. You've done the diagnostic work, listened inside your organisation. You've gathered external perspectives from customers, competitors, and the market. You've synthesised all of it into a clear point of view on why growth stalled and what needs to change. Now comes the hard part, making decisions and getting your team to make decisions that actually move you forward. Strategic decisions about where to focus. Product decisions about what to build. Go-to-market decisions about how to position and sell. Organisational decisions about structure and people. Resource decisions about what to fund and what to kill. And here's what makes this difficult. The brain, your team's brain, it's not optimised for making good decisions in uncertainty. We have systematic blind spots. We fall into predictable traps. We're overconfident about some things and underconfident about others. We mistake feelings for analysis. We see patterns that aren't there and miss patterns that are. We anchor to irrelevant information, and we're swayed by how options are framed more than by their actual merits. This isn't failure, this is neurology. This is how the human brain works. And understanding how we really make decisions, not how we think we make them, but what's actually happening in our heads, is essential for making better decisions and building teams that do the same. This briefing is about decision-making reality. We'll cover how your brain actually works when making decisions, the most dangerous cognitive biases for leaders, how to optimize yourself for better judgment, how to build decision-making practices in your team that account for human limitation whilst leveraging human strengths. But first, we need to understand something critical. Much of what you think you know is actually belief, not knowledge, and there is meaningful difference. When we say our ICP is mid-market companies in healthcare, that's a belief. It may well be well-founded. It might be based on data, but it's still a belief, not an immutable fact. When you say we lose deals because of pricing, that's a belief about causation. When you say this person would be great in that role, that's a belief about future performance. Most of our decisions are based on beliefs we hold with varying levels of confidence. And one of the most important meta skills for decision making is being clear about what's a belief versus a fact, and being honest about your confidence level in each belief. Because when you operate as if your beliefs are facts, you stop testing them. You stop updating them. You make decisions based on outdated or wrong beliefs. And then you create organisational cultures where people are afraid to challenge assumptions because assumptions are treated as truth. So let's start by understanding how we really make decisions, and then we can talk about how to go about it better. Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for research showing that humans have two systems for thinking and deciding. He calls them System 1 and System 2. And understanding the difference is fundamental to improving your decision making. System 1 is your brain's fast mode. It operates automatically and unconsciously. It's pattern recognition. It's gut instinct. It's the immediate reaction that you have to something. When you walk into a meeting and immediately sense tension in the room, that's System 1. When you look at a pitch deck and instantly think, this feels off, that's System 1. When someone asks you a question and you answer without thinking, it's System 1. System 1 is incredibly valuable. It's how you drive a car without consciously thinking about every movement, how you read facial expressions, how you recognise that something's wrong even if you can't immediately articulate why. Experienced CEOs have highly developed System 1 thinking in their domain. They can sense problems before they're obvious, recognise patterns quickly, and make rapid judgment based on deep experience. But System 1 has predictable flaws. It jumps to conclusions. It's overconfident. It's easily influenced by framing and context. It mistakes correlation for causation. It sees patterns in randomness. It's biased by recent experiences and emotional state. More importantly, System 1 thinks it's doing System 2's work. You feel like you're analysing rationally when you're actually reacting intuitively. The feeling of certainty is not the same as actual certainty, but your brain doesn't naturally distinguish between them. System 2 is your brain's slow mode. It's conscious, effortful reasoning. It's when you work through a problem step by step, when you calculate something, when you deliberately weigh options, when you force yourself to consider alternatives. System 2 is what you use when you build a financial model, analyse competitive positioning, work through strategic options, or evaluate a major decision systematically. System 2 is more accurate than System 1 for complex decisions, but it's slow, it's tiring, and your brain resists using it. System 2 is cognitively expensive. It takes energy and focus. So your brain defaults to System 1 wherever possible. Here's the problem. Most of the time you think you're using System 2 when you're actually using System 1. You feel like you're being analytical, but you're actually rationalising a conclusion that you've already reached intuitively. System 2 is often just System 1's PR department, creating logical-sounding explanations for intuitive judgments. So what does this mean for you as a CEO trying to speed up growth? First, recognise that most of your decisions and most of your team's decisions are being made by System 1. It's not inherently bad. System 1 is fast, and speed matters. Experienced leaders have good System 1 judgment in their domain. But System 1 is overconfident and prone to bias. So the question isn't, how do I only use System 2? It's, how do I know when to override System 1? How do I catch myself when System 1 is leading me astray? And how do I build practices that help my team do the same? Second, understand that confidence and accuracy are not the same thing. System 1 generates strong feelings of certainty even when wrong. You can be very confident and very wrong at the same time. In fact, the times when you're most certain are often the times that you need to slow down and engage System 2. Third, recognise that cognitive effort is limited. You can't run every decision through rigorous System 2 analysis. You'd be paralysed. So you need to be strategic about when to invest in deliberate analysis versus when to trust intuition and experience. And the art is knowing the difference. And that starts with understanding the specific ways that System 1 misleads us. There are hundreds of documented cognitive biases. We're going to focus on the ones that most consistently cause problems for leaders making strategic decisions in uncertainty. Let's start with confirmation bias, seeking evidence that supports what you already believe. This is probably the most dangerous one. Once you form a hypothesis, you unconsciously seek information that confirms it and ignore or discount information that contradicts it. You believe your product is better than competitors, so you notice every positive customer comment and dismiss negative ones as outliers. You believe a particular person should be promoted, so you see evidence of their capabilities and overlook their weakness. You believe pricing is the problem, so every lost deal gets attributed to pricing, even when the real issue could be something else. Confirmation bias feels like objective analysis because you are gathering evidence, but you are gathering it selectively. And worse, you don't realise that you're doing it. And the danger for CEOs? You've already formed beliefs about why growth stalled based on internal listening and initial analysis. Now, as you make decisions, you'll unconsciously seek evidence that confirms your diagnosis and discount evidence that challenges it, even if your diagnosis is partially wrong. The second bias is anchoring, overweighting the first information you receive. Whatever number or idea you encounter first disproportionately influences your judgment, even if it's arbitrary or irrelevant. If someone mentions that a competitor is priced at £50 per user, that number becomes your anchor for thinking about pricing, even if it's not even comparable or relevant. If your first hire in a role costs $120,000, that becomes your anchor for what that role should cost, even if the market has changed. Anchoring happens unconsciously and persists even when you know about it. The first version of a presentation becomes the anchor for how you think about a strategy. The first revenue projection becomes the anchor for expectations. The danger for CEOs in negotiations, strategy discussions and planning, whoever sets the initial anchor often wins by shaping the conversation, and you might not even realise that you've been anchored. The third bias is availability bias, judging likelihood by what easily comes to mind. You assess the probability or importance of something based on how easily you can recall examples, not on actual frequency or data. If a customer just churned, you overestimate churn risk. If a hire recently failed, you become overly cautious about hiring. If a product launch went badly, you're more pessimistic about the next one than the data warrants. Dramatic, emotional, or recent events are more mentally available, so you overweigh them. Quiet, gradual, or distant events are less available, so you underweight them. The danger for CEOs? You make decisions based on what's salient and recent, not on what's actually probable or even important. One loud customer complaint feels more important than 10 quiet, satisfied customers. One failed initiative feels more significant than 3 successful ones. The fourth is overconfidence, believing you know more than you do. Humans are systematically overconfident about their knowledge and predictions. We think our beliefs are more accurate than they are. We think our plans are more likely to succeed than they are. We underestimate uncertainty. Studies show that when people say they're 90% confident about something, they're right about 70% of the time. When experts predict outcomes in their field, they're barely more accurate than random chance. Yet we feel certain. We trust our judgment. We make decisions as if we know what is going to happen. So the danger for CEOs? You'll underestimate how hard it will be to restart growth. You'll be too confident in your strategic choices. You'll commit resource based on overconfident projections, and your team will do the same, especially if your culture rewards confidence over accuracy. The fifth is sunk cost fallacy, continuing because you've already invested. You continue investing in something not because the future returns justify it, but because you've already invested so much that walking away feels like admitting failure. You keep funding a product that's not working because you've already spent $2 million on it. You keep a struggling executive in a role because you invested so much in recruiting and onboarding them. You stick with a strategy because you've committed to it publicly, even though evidence suggests it's not working. Rationally, sunk costs should not matter. The only question is whether future investment will generate sufficient return. But emotionally, walking away from past investment feels like a loss, and humans hate loss. So the danger for CEOs? You'll stick with failing initiatives too long because of past commitment, and your team will do the same. The organisation will waste resource on things that should have been killed because no one wants to admit a mistake. The sixth is the planning fallacy, underestimating how long things take. People consistently underestimate how long projects will take and how much they'll cost, even when they know about past projects that took longer and cost more. You think you'll implement a new system in 3 months. It takes 9. You'll think you'll hire a critical role in 6 weeks. It takes 4 months. You project that a product will generate $5 million in the first year revenue. It generates $1 million. You know that past projects took longer than planned, but you believe that this time is different. This time you have better people, better plans, greater commitment, so you make the same optimistic projection. The danger for CEOs? The strategic plan assumes unrealistic timelines and outcomes. Board expectations are based on plans that won't be achieved. You commit to things that you cannot deliver and then either fail or burn out your team trying to meet impossible deadlines. And guess what? These biases interact and reinforce each other. You anchor to an initial strategy. And confirmation bias causes you to seek evidence that it's working whilst ignoring evidence that it's not. Availability bias makes recent wins feel more significant than they are, increasing your confidence. Overconfidence makes you underestimate how hard execution will be. When results don't come as fast as planned, planning fallacy, you stick with it too long because of the sunk costs. And none of it feels like bias. It feels like good judgment, experience, commitment, Leadership. So how do you get better at this? You can't turn off System 1. You can't eliminate bias. But you can build practices that catch yourself when you're being led astray. Here are 6 things that you can practice. The first is to distinguish belief from fact and state your confidence. Start making explicit statements about what you believe and how confident you are. Not, our ICP is mid-market companies. Instead, I believe our ICP is mid-market companies, and I'm about 70% confident in that based on our best customers, but I'm less certain whether we can win in that segment at scale. Not, this hire will work out. Instead, I believe this person has the capabilities we need. I'm 60% confident they will succeed in this specific role given our culture and our constraints. So this does several things. First, it forces you to think about your actual confidence level, which is usually lower than the certainty you feel. Second, it creates space for updating your beliefs as the new evidence comes in. Third, it signals to your team that beliefs should be tested and not treated as fact. Annie Duke, a professional poker player who studies decision-making, calls this thinking in bets. Every belief is a bet with varying odds. Being a good decision-maker means accurately assessing the odds and being willing to update as you get more information. The second is pre-mortems before big decisions. So before committing to a major decision, do a pre-mortem. Imagine it's 12 months from now and the decision was a disaster. Now work backwards. What went wrong? This exercise forces you to engage System 2 and surface concerns that you might be suppressing. It counteracts overconfidence by making you explicitly consider failure modes. In practice, you're about to commit to a new go-to-market strategy. Gather your team and say, it's a year from now. This strategy failed spectacularly. We are worse off than before. What happened? Let people brainstorm. Don't defend or dismiss. Just capture those failure scenarios. Now ask, which of these are actually likely? What can we do to prevent them? Does this change our decision? Could be that you still proceed, but you will have identified risks that you need to mitigate or evidence that you need to see early to validate that you are on track. The third is to seek disconfirming evidence. Deliberately ask, what would have to be true for my belief to be wrong? What evidence would convince me that I'm wrong? And if you can't articulate what could change your mind, you're not holding a belief, you're holding an ideology, and ideologies are dangerous in business. So in practice, you believe you're losing deals because of pricing. Ask yourself, what evidence would convince me that pricing isn't the real issue? If I tested different pricing and win rates didn't change, would I update my belief? If customers consistently said price wasn't the deciding factor, would I believe them? If the answer is nothing will convince me, you have a problem. You've moved from hypothesis to dogma. The fourth is decision journaling. So keep a record of major decisions. What you decided, what you believed would happen, what the confidence level was, and why you decided that way. Then, in 6 or 12 months later, review. What actually happened? Were you right? If not, why not? Were you overconfident? Did you miss something? Did you ignore evidence? This is painful. Reviewing past decisions and seeing that you were wrong is uncomfortable. But it's the fastest way to calibrate your confidence and identify your personal bias patterns. Perhaps you consistently underestimate implementation timelines. Now you know to adjust future projections. Maybe you are consistently overconfident about new initiatives. Now you can be more skeptical of your own enthusiasm. The fifth is slow down high-stakes decisions. Not every decision needs deep analysis, but high-stakes, irreversible decisions deserve System 2 treatment. Create forcing function. I'm not deciding this today. I will sleep on it. I'm going to talk to 2 trusted advisors and decide tomorrow. Or I'm going to test this assumption before we commit. This simple delay activates System 2. Your initial reaction might be right, but giving yourself space to think deliberately often reveals flaws that you didn't see in the moment. And the sixth is to cultivate advisors who challenge you. You need people in your life who will tell you when they think you are wrong. Not yes people, not people who are always contrarian, people who are smart, who care about you and your success and will push back when your thinking is fuzzy or biased. This could be a board member, a mentor, a peer CEO, or the Zockery team who are great at this. Whoever it is, you need to explicitly ask them to challenge your assumptions. And you need to receive that challenge non-defensively. When you're working through a major decision, talk it through with this person. Not to get validation, but to get challenged. They should ask, what are you missing? What's your confidence level? What if you're wrong? And what is the case against this? To state the obvious, individual good decision-making is necessary, but not sufficient. You need your entire leadership team to make good decisions, and that requires building practice and culture that account for human cognitive limitations. The single most important thing you can do is to make it safe to disagree with you and with each other, because if people are afraid to challenge assumptions, biases go unchecked and bad decisions get made. And this means explicitly inviting disagreement. I need someone to make the case against this. Rewarding people who speak up even when they're wrong. I appreciate you raising that concern. Never shoot the messenger when someone brings bad news. Modelling changing your mind when presented with better arguments. If your team thinks that you want agreement and not accuracy, they'll give you agreement. And you'll make worse decisions because you're not getting real input. For important decisions, don't discuss until someone feels like deciding. Use a structured process. Frame the decision clearly. What exactly are we deciding? By when? Generate options. Brainstorm alternatives. Don't immediately critique. Get options on the table first. Identify criteria. What factors matter in this decision? How will we evaluate options? Seek disconfirming evidence. For each option, deliberately ask, what is the case against this? What could go wrong? What assumptions are we making? State confidence levels. How certain are we? And what do we need to validate? Decide and document. What did we decide? What did we believe would happen? How confident are we? And what would cause us to revisit? This structure forces System 2 engagement and reduces bias. Perfect consensus is rarely possible and often not desirable. Sometimes reasonable people will disagree after thoughtful discussion. The practice of disagree and commit means that once a decision is made, everyone commits to executing it fully, even if they disagreed with it. This requires clarity about when input is welcome, before the decision, and when it's not, after the decision. It also requires that people feel heard before the decision is made. But it prevents the pattern in which people undermine decisions that they disagreed with, or in which teams endlessly relitigate choices. The major strategic choices assign people to argue both sides. One group makes the best case for option A, and another makes the best case for option B. And then you debate. This counteracts confirmation bias and overconfidence. It forces people to genuinely consider alternatives, rather than immediately defend their preferred option. It also reveals when a decision is actually close. When both sides make strong cases, you learn that there isn't an obviously right answer, and you need to be humble about your choice. When possible, test assumptions before fully committing. If you think pricing is the issue, test different pricing with a segment. If you think a positioning change will work, test it in a small market before going all in. Experiments turn belief into evidence. They reduce the stakes of being wrong because you're testing rather than betting the company. Obviously, not everything can be tested. Some decisions are one-way doors, but more things can be de-risked through experimentation than most leaders assume. 3 to 6 months after major decisions, review them. What did we expect? What actually happened? Were we right? If not, why not? And this is not about blame. This is about organisational learning. Did we move too fast? Too slow? Did we ignore warning signs? Were we overconfident? Did we miss something in our analysis? Teams that review decisions get better at making decisions. They calibrate their confidence. They identify their collective biases. They learn what processes worked and what didn't. Teams that never review decisions keep making the same mistakes without realising it. Let me close with this. Perfect objectivity isn't possible. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine that takes shortcuts and makes biases. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's how you make thousands of decisions daily without paralysis. But for high-stakes decisions that determine whether you optimise growth, you need to be better than default human decision-making. You need to understand how your brain misleads you. You need practice that catch bias. And you need teams that challenge assumptions. Most importantly, you need to be honest about what you know versus what you believe, and clear about your confidence in each belief. Much of leadership involves making decisions in the face of uncertainty with incomplete information. You'll never have perfect data. You'll never eliminate all risk. But you can be more accurate about what you're uncertain about, more willing to update beliefs as evidence comes in, and more humble about the limits of your judgment. The most successful CEOs aren't the ones that are always right. They are the ones who know what they don't know, update their beliefs when evidence changes, create teams where assumptions get challenged, build systems that catch bias before it becomes strategy. You don't need to be a perfect decision maker. You need to be a learning decision maker, someone who gets incrementally better at judgment over time. Someone who builds an organisation that makes better decisions collectively than any individual could make alone. And that's the work. And it starts with understanding that your brain, as brilliant as it is systematically biased. And it's okay as long as you account for it.